Forget everything you thought you knew about pyramid building. We're about to digitally recreate the impossible. This isn't just a theory. It's a dynamic simulation that reveals the astonishing ingenuity and sheer scale of moving 2.3 million colossal blocks, proving how ancient Egyptians achieved this monumental feat. Welcome to the Forgotten File. Imagine standing at the base of the Great Pyramid of Giza. The desert air is cool in the early morning, but the sun is already beginning to rise, casting long shadows across the sand. You look up, and the pyramid towers above you, an ancient mountain of stone, built more than 4,500 years ago. It's hard to even grasp the size until you see a single block up close. Each one is as big as a small car, weighing as much as 80 tons. Now, imagine moving not just one, but 2.3 million of these blocks, stacking them with such precision that the pyramid's sides are almost perfectly straight, and the base is leveled too within a fraction of an inch. No wheels, no cranes, no modern machines. It's just human hands, simple tools, and a vision that still leaves us in awe. Let's start with a simple question. How? How did the ancient Egyptians pull off what seems, even today, almost impossible? This is the core mystery that has fascinated historians, engineers, and dreamers for centuries. The more you look at the details, the more incredible the story becomes. To set the stage, let's break down the numbers. The Great Pyramid is made up of about 2.3 million blocks of limestone and granite. The average block weighs about 2.5 tons, but some are much heavier. The pyramid's base covers more than 13 acres. Its original height was nearly 150 meters, almost as tall as a 50-story building. And all of this was built in just about 20 years. Now, picture the ancient construction site. There are no blueprints, no power tools, no trucks. The workers are using copper chisels, wooden sledges, and ropes made from papyrus. The desert sun is relentless, and the Nile floods every year, changing the landscape. Yet somehow, the Egyptians managed to organize, transport, and place each block with astonishing accuracy. It's no wonder that the Great Pyramid has been called the world's greatest engineering mystery. For centuries, people have tried to explain how it was built. Some theories are simple, others are wild. But all of them come back to the same question. How do you move and stack millions of massive stones without the technology we take for granted today? Let's take a closer look at the challenge. Imagine you're in charge of the project. You have thousands of workers, but no engines or electricity. You need to move each block from the quarry to the construction site, then lift it into place, sometimes more than 100 feet above the ground. Every block has to fit perfectly, or the whole structure could collapse. And you have to do this over and over, day after day, for 2 decades. It's a challenge that would test even the most advanced builders today. But the Egyptians did it, and their work has stood the test of time. To really understand the scale, let's break it down even further. If the pyramid was built in 20 years, that's about 7,300 days. To place 2.3 million blocks in that time, workers would have had to set a block every 2 to 3 minutes, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, for 2 decades straight. That's without accounting for the time needed to quarry the stone, transport it, and prepare the site. The logistics alone are mind-boggling, and yet the evidence is right in front of us. The pyramid stands, its stones still locked together after thousands of years. The joints between the blocks are so tight that you can fit a razor blade between them. Sides are aligned almost perfectly with the cardinal points north, south, east, and west. The base is level too within a few centimeters, despite being built on uneven bedrock. Even the casing stones, many of which have been lost to time, were polished to a mirror-like finish, reflecting the sun so brightly that ancient writers describe the pyramid as shining like a gem. But how did they do it? That's the question that has launched 1,000 theories. Some say the Egyptians used massive ramps, built from mud, brick, and limestone, to drag the stones up to each new level. Others suggest they used levers, counterweights, or even water canals to float the blocks into place. There are even more outlandish ideas: giant kites, lost technologies, or help from visitors beyond our world. The truth is, we don't have a single, definitive answer. The ancient Egyptians left behind plenty of art and writing, but almost nothing that explains exactly how the pyramids were built. Most of what we know comes from archaeology, engineering experiments, and a lot of educated guesswork. But what if we could do more than guess? What if we could actually test these theories not just on paper, but in a living, breathing simulation? That's where our story takes a modern turn. Today we have tools the ancient Egyptians could never have imagined. With powerful computers and advanced physics engines, we can recreate the Giza plateau in stunning detail. We can model the weight and shape of each block, the strength of ropes and sledges, the friction of sand and stone. We can simulate the manpower needed, the time required, and the challenges faced at every step. Before we get to the digital simulation, let's pause and appreciate the human side of this story. Imagine the workers' tens of thousands of them, laboring in the heat year after year. Some were skilled craftsmen, others were farmers working during the Nile's flood season. They lived in nearby villages, ate together, and built a community around the construction site. Recent discoveries have shown that these workers were not slaves, as once believed, but paid laborers who took pride in their work. They left behind graffiti, tools, and even bakeries and breweries that fed the massive workforce. The pyramid was more than just a tomb for a pharaoh. It was a national project, a symbol of unity and ambition. Every block set in place was a testament to human determination and ingenuity. As we prepare to launch our digital recreation, let's remember that this is not just about numbers and physics. It's about people, real men and women who dreamed big, worked hard, and left a legacy that still inspires us today. In the next part of our story, we'll dive into the ancient theories that have tried to explain this feat. We'll look at ramps, levers, and even water canals, each one a piece of the puzzle. We'll see how these ideas have been tested both in the real world and in our digital simulation. And we'll start to uncover which methods might actually work when you scale them up to pyramid size. So as we stand at the foot of the Great Pyramid, looking up at its massive stones, let's remember that every great achievement begins with a question: how did they do it? The answer, as we'll see, is more surprising and more inspiring than you might think. The Great Pyramid stands as a silent challenge to every generation. How did they do it? For centuries, this question has sparked debate, imagination, and even a little frustration. Theories have come and gone, each one trying to explain how the ancient Egyptians moved and stacked millions of massive stones with such precision. Today, we're going to break down the most famous ideas: ramps, levers, and water canals, and see how they hold up, both in the real world and in our digital simulation. Let's start with the most popular and enduring theory: the ramp. Imagine the construction site thousands of years ago. The sun is blazing, the air is filled with the sounds of hammers and chisels, and a long, sloping ramp stretches from the ground up to the growing pyramid. Workers drag huge blocks up the ramp, using ropes, sledges, and sheer muscle power. It's a simple idea, and on a small scale it works. Archaeologists have even found traces of ramps at other pyramid sites supporting the theory. But when you scale it up to the size of the Great Pyramid, things get complicated fast. To reach the top of a 150-meter pyramid, the ramp would have to be incredibly long, with a gentle enough slope for workers to pull the blocks. Some estimates suggest the ramp would need to be over a mile long and as wide as a modern highway. That's a staggering amount of material, possibly more than the pyramid itself. And once the pyramid was finished, the ramp would have to be dismantled, leaving little trace behind. There are other problems too. The ramp would have to be constantly rebuilt and extended as the pyramid grew taller. The logistics of moving millions of tons of stone, not just for the pyramid but for the ramp itself, are mind-boggling. And then there's the question of space. Where would you even put such a massive structure on the crowded Giza plateau? Some researchers have suggested spiral ramps wrapping around the pyramid as it rises. This would save space, but it creates new challenges. How do you keep the ramp stable as it winds higher and higher? How do you turn sharp corners with a massive stone block? And how do you keep the surface smooth enough for sledges to slide, but rough enough for workers to keep their footing? To test these ideas, let's turn to our digital simulation. Using a powerful platform like Unity or Unreal Engine, we can recreate the Giza Plateau in stunning detail. We can build a virtual ramp, set the slope, and see how many workers it would take to drag a block up to the top. We can measure the time, the effort, and the resources needed, and we can see in real time where the method starts to break down. In our simulation, the straight ramp works well for the lower levels. Blocks can be moved up with enough manpower, and the physics engine shows the friction and resistance as the sledges slide over sand and stone. But as the pyramid grows, the ramp becomes longer, steeper, and harder to maintain. The number of workers needed skyrockets, and the time to move each block increases dramatically. By the time we reach the upper levels, the ramp is so massive that it's almost unmanageable. The simulation shows what many engineers have suspected. The straight ramp, while possible in theory, becomes nearly impossible in practice at this scale. Next, let's look at the lever theory. This idea suggests that workers used simple levers, long wooden poles, to lift the blocks up one level at a time. By placing a fulcrum under the pole and pushing down, they could raise the block just enough to slide it onto the next course. It's a clever use of basic physics, and experiments have shown that it works for smaller stones. In our digital recreation, we set up a team of workers with levers, simulating the force needed to lift a 2.5-ton block. The physics engine calculates the stress on the wood, the angle of the lever, and the number of people required. For the lower levels, the method is surprisingly efficient. The blocks can be lifted and moved with a manageable amount of effort. But as the pyramid rises, the challenge grows. The higher you go, the more dangerous and difficult the process becomes. The simulation shows that while levers are useful for small adjustments in the first few layers, they struggle with the sheer height and weight involved in the upper courses. Now let's consider one of the most intriguing ideas: water canals. Some researchers believe the Egyptians used the annual flooding of the Nile to their advantage, building canals to float the blocks closer to the construction site. In some versions, the blocks are floated all the way to the base of the pyramid, reducing the need for overland transport. In others, water is used to create a kind of hydraulic lift, raising the blocks up a series of pools or locks. In our simulation, we model a network of canals, adjusting the water level to see how the blocks move. The results are promising. Floating a heavy stone is much easier than dragging it over land. The simulation shows that with careful planning, the Egyptians could have used water to transport blocks from the quarry to the site, especially during the flood season. However, the idea of using water to lift blocks up the pyramid itself is more challenging. The engineering required to build and maintain a series of water locks or pools at increasing heights is complex, and the simulation reveals the risk of leaks, collapses, and wasted effort. To bring these theories to life, we use simple animations and recreated experiments. We show workers dragging blocks up a ramp, teams using levers to lift stones, and boats floating blocks down a canal. Each method has its strengths and weaknesses, and our simulation helps us see where the real challenges lie. But the most important lesson is this: no single method seems to solve every problem. The ramp is great for the lower levels, but becomes unwieldy at the top. Levers are useful for small lifts, but struggle with height. Water transport is efficient for moving blocks horizontally, but not vertically. The simulation makes it clear that the Egyptians likely used a combination of techniques, adapting to the challenges as they went. As we critique each theory, we also have to consider the human element. Every method requires not just tools and materials, but organization, communication, and teamwork. The simulation lets us model the number of workers needed, the time required for each task, and the resources consumed. It's a reminder that the real genius of the pyramid builders was not just in their tools, but in their ability to coordinate thousands of people toward a single monumental goal. In the next part of our story, we'll introduce our modern simulation in more detail. We'll show you the digital recreation of the Giza plateau, the physics engine that powers our experiments, the parameters we use to test each method. We'll explain how we model human power, material properties, and the real-world challenges faced by the ancient builders. And we'll invite you to see, step by step, how the impossible becomes possible, at least in the virtual world. So as we leave behind the ancient theories and step into the world of digital experimentation, let's remember that every great mystery is a puzzle with many pieces. The answer to how the pyramids were built may not be a single method, but a combination of ingenuity, adaptation, and relentless human effort. The next chapter in our journey is about to begin. The ancient theories are fascinating, but to truly understand how the Great Pyramid was built, we need to do more than just talk. We need to experiment. That's where our journey takes a leap into the modern age. Today we have tools that the ancient Egyptians could never have dreamed of. Powerful computers, advanced physics engines, and digital worlds where we can test ideas without lifting a single stone. Welcome to the digital simulation. Let's start by introducing the platform. For this project, we're using a state-of-the-art simulation, Engine Think Unity or Unreal Engine. These platforms are famous for creating video games, but they're also perfect for scientific experiments. Why? Because they let us build a virtual world where every detail can be controlled, measured, and changed at will. We can recreate the Giza plateau, model the pyramid block by block, and test every theory with the click of a button. The first step is to build our digital Giza. We start with satellite data and archaeological maps to get the landscape right. The plateau is recreated in 3D, complete with the Nile River, the quarries, and the ancient workers' village. The pyramid itself is modeled to scale with every block in its proper place. Even the weather and lighting can be adjusted to match the real conditions of ancient Egypt. Next, we create a single stone block, the heart of our experiment. In the simulation, this block is given the same weight, size, and material properties as a real limestone or granite block from the pyramid. The physics engine takes over, calculating how much force is needed to move it, how it reacts to friction, what happens if it's dropped or dragged across sand. But the real magic happens when we add people. In our simulation, human power units represent teams of workers. Each unit can push, pull, lift, or carry, just like real laborers. We can adjust their strength, stamina, and coordination, and even simulate fatigue over time. This lets us test not just the tools, but the human effort required for each method. Well, let's talk about the parameters. Every good experiment needs clear rules. In our simulation, we set the following: physics engine, realistic gravity, friction, and collision detection. Human power, each worker can exert a certain amount of force based on modern studies of manual labor. Material properties, limestone, granite, wood, and rope all behave according to their real-world strengths and weaknesses. Time. Every action is measured in real time, so we can see how long each method takes. Resources. We track the number of workers, the amount of material used, and the wear and tear on tools. With everything in place, we're ready to start testing. The first method we try is the straight ramp. We build a massive ramp in the simulation, set the slope, and assign teams of workers to drag the block up to the pyramid. The physics engine shows the resistance as the block slides over the ramp, the strain on the ropes, and the effort required from each worker. We can see in real time how the ramp holds up, where it starts to crack or collapse, and how the workers respond to the challenge. Next, we test the spiral ramp. This time, the ramp wraps around the pyramid, saving space but adding new difficulties. The simulation shows how the curve affects the movement of the block, how the workers have to adjust their grip, and how the ramp's structure changes as it rises. We can even simulate accidents. What happens if a block slips, or if the ramp gives way under the weight? Then we move on to levers. In the digital world, we set up teams with long wooden poles, using them to lift the block one level at a time. The simulation calculates the force needed, the risk of the pole snapping, and the coordination required from the workers. We can see how effective the method is for different heights, and where it starts to become dangerous or inefficient. Finally, we test the water canal theory. We dig virtual canals from the Nile to the construction site, flood them with water, and float the block on a wooden barge. The simulation tracks the speed of the current, the drag on the barge, and the effort needed to steer it. We can even simulate the annual flooding of the Nile, seeing how the changing water levels affect the process. Throughout these tests, the simulation gives us detailed feedback. We can see how many workers are needed for each method, how long it takes to move a single block, and how much material is consumed. We can measure the efficiency of each technique, the risk of failure, and the impact on the worker's health and stamina. But the simulation isn't just about numbers, it's about discovery. As we run each test, we start to see patterns. Some methods work well for the lower levels of the pyramid, but struggle as the structure rises. Others are efficient for small blocks, but not for the massive stones used in the king's chamber. The digital world lets us combine methods. trying out hybrid solutions that might never have been considered before. For example, what if the Egyptians used ramps for the first few layers, then switched to levers or cranes for the higher courses? What if they floated the blocks as close as possible, then dragged them the final distance over sand? The simulation lets us test these ideas, tweaking the parameters until we find the most effective combination. One of the most powerful features of the simulation is the ability to accelerate time. We can watch the entire construction process unfold in minutes, seeing the pyramid rise block by block. We can spot bottlenecks, identify weak points, and see where the process slows down or speeds up. This bird's-eye view gives us insights that would be impossible to gain from traditional experiments or historical records. As we watch the digital pyramid take shape, it's easy to feel a sense of awe. The sheer scale of the project, the coordination required, and the ingenuity of the builders all come to life in a way that no textbook or documentary can match. The simulation doesn't just answer questions, it sparks new ones. What if the Egyptians had access to better tools? What if they faced unexpected challenges, like floods or droughts? How did they adapt and innovate as the project progressed? The digital recreation also helps us appreciate the human side of the story. Every block moved, every ramp built. Every lever lifted represents the effort of real people workers, engineers, and leaders who dedicated years of their lives to a single monumental goal. The simulation lets us step into their shoes, if only for a moment, and experience the challenges and triumphs of pyramid building firsthand. In the next part of our story, we'll put these methods to the ultimate test. We'll run the simulation with different combinations, track the successes and failures, and analyze the results. We'll see where the ramp method breaks down, where levers shine, and where water transport makes all the difference. We'll dig into the efficiency metrics: time taken, manpower needed, and resources consumed, and see which methods come closest to solving the impossible challenge. So as we leave our digital Giza plateau, with its virtual workers and simulated stones, let's remember that the search for answers is never over. Every experiment brings us closer to the truth, but also opens new doors to wonder and discovery. The next chapter in our journey is about to begin, and the results may surprise you. The digital Giza plateau is alive with activity. Virtual workers haul ropes, push sledges, and maneuver massive blocks across the sand. Ramps rise and spiral, levers creak under the weight, and water canals glisten in the Egyptian sun. Now it's time to put all these methods to the test. The simulation is ready. The question is, which technique or combination can actually build the Great Pyramid? We start with the straight ramp, the classic theory. In the simulation, a long sloping ramp stretches from the quarry to the base of the pyramid. Teams of workers drag a block up the ramp, their progress tracked in real time. At first, things go smoothly. The lower courses are manageable, and the ramp's gentle slope allows the blocks to be moved with steady effort. The simulation shows the friction between the sledges and the ramp, the strain on the ropes, and the coordination needed to keep everything moving. But as the pyramid grows, the ramp must grow too. It gets longer, steeper, and more difficult to maintain. The number of workers needed increases dramatically. The simulation's efficiency metrics start to dip. The time to move each block rises, and the ramp itself becomes a massive construction project, almost as big as the pyramid. By the time we reach the upper levels, the ramp is so unwieldy that it's nearly impossible to use. The digital workers slow to a crawl. The simulation flashes warnings about structural instability and resource exhaustion. Next, we try the spiral ramp. This method wraps a ramp around the pyramid as it rises, saving space and material. In the simulation, the workers now have to navigate tight corners and steeper slopes. The blocks are harder to maneuver, and the risk of accidents increases. The simulation shows that while the spiral ramp is more efficient in terms of space, it introduces new challenges. The corners are tricky, and the ramp's surface must be constantly repaired. The time to move each block is still high, and the risk of a block slipping or a ramp collapsing is ever present. We move on to levers. In the digital world, teams of workers use long wooden poles to lift the blocks one level at a time. The simulation calculates the force needed, the risk of the pole snapping, and the coordination required. For the lower levels, levers are surprisingly effective. The blocks can be lifted and moved with a manageable amount of effort. But as the pyramid rises, the challenge grows. The higher you go, the more dangerous and difficult the process becomes. The simulation shows that while levers are useful for small adjustments in the first few layers, they struggle with the sheer height and weight involved in the upper courses. Now, let's test the water canal theory. We dig virtual canals from the Nile to the construction site, flood them with water, and float the block on a wooden barge. The simulation tracks the speed of the current, the drag on the barge, and the effort needed to steer it. Floating the blocks from the quarry to the base of the pyramid is efficient and saves a lot of manpower. However, the idea of using water to lift blocks up the pyramid itself is more challenging. The engineering required to build and maintain a series of waterlocks or pools at increasing heights is complex, and the simulation reveals the risk of leaks, collapses, and wasted effort. With each method, the simulation provides a wealth of data. We can see the number of workers needed, the time required for each task, and the resources consumed. We can measure the efficiency of each technique, the risk of failure, and the impact on the workers' health and stamina. The simulation even lets us model fatigue, showing how the pace slows as workers tire and need to rest. But the most important lesson is this: no single method solves every problem. The ramp is great for the lower levels, but becomes unwieldy at the top. Levers are useful for small lifts, but struggle with height. Water transport is efficient for moving blocks horizontally, but not vertically. The simulation makes it clear that the Egyptians likely used a combination of techniques, adapting to the challenges as they went. To dig deeper, we start combining methods. What if the Egyptians used ramps for the first few layers, then switched to levers or cranes for the higher courses? What if they floated the blocks as close as possible, then dragged them the final distance over sand? The simulation lets us test these ideas, tweaking the parameters until we find the most effective combination. One of the most powerful features of the simulation is the ability to accelerate time. We can watch the entire construction process unfold in minutes, seeing the pyramid rise block by block. We can spot bottlenecks, identify weak points, and see where the process slows down or speeds up. This bird's-eye view gives us insights that would be impossible to gain from traditional experiments or historical records. As we watch the digital pyramid take shape, it's easy to feel a sense of awe. The sheer scale of the project, the coordination required, and the ingenuity of the builders all come to life in a way that no textbook or documentary can match. The simulation doesn't just answer questions, it sparks new ones. What if the Egyptians had access to better tools? What if they faced unexpected challenges, like floods or droughts? How did they adapt and innovate as the project progressed? The digital recreation also helps us appreciate the human side of the story. Every block moved, every ramp built. Every lever lifted represents the effort of real people workers, engineers, and leaders who dedicated years of their lives to a single, monumental goal. The simulation lets us step into their shoes, if only for a moment, and experience the challenges and triumphs of pyramid building firsthand. As the simulation runs, we see moments of success and moments of failure. Sometimes a method works perfectly for a while, only to break down as the pyramid grows. Other times a small tweak, like adding more workers, changing the angle of a ramp, or reinforcing a lever, makes all the difference. The data shows us where the real bottlenecks are: the upper levels, the tight corners, the need for constant repairs and adjustments. We also see the importance of logistics. The simulation tracks not just the movement of blocks, but the flow of materials, the scheduling of workers, and the management of resources. It becomes clear that building the pyramid was as much about organization as it was about engineering. The Egyptians had to plan every step, coordinate thousands of people, and adapt to changing conditions on the fly. In the end, the simulation reveals that the most plausible solution is not a single method, but a combination of techniques, each one used where it works best. Ramps for the lower levels, levers and cranes for the upper courses, water transport for moving blocks from the quarry to the site. The Egyptians were master problem solvers, constantly adapting and innovating to meet the challenges they faced. In the next and final part of our story, you'll unveil the simulation's best method, the combination that proves most effective in building the pyramid. We'll show it in accelerated time, discuss the surprising insights gained, and reflect on the enduring awe of ancient engineering. We'll also consider what this experiment teaches us about human ingenuity, teamwork, and the power of asking how. So as we leave our digital workers to their monumental task, let's remember that the real story of the pyramids is not just about stones and ramps, but about people. People who dared to dream big, work hard, and achieve the impossible. The final chapter of our journey is about to begin. The digital sun rises over our virtual Giza plateau. After countless simulated days and nights, millions of data points, and endless combinations of methods, the pyramid finally stands complete block by block, layer by layer. The simulation has run its course, and now it's time to reveal what we've learned. Let's watch as the simulation's best method unfolds in accelerated time. The process begins with a flurry of activity. Teams of workers haul blocks from the quarry, floating them down the Nile on sturdy wooden barges during the flood season. The simulation shows how water transport, when the river is high, saves enormous amounts of energy and manpower. The blocks are offloaded onto sledges, then dragged across the sand to the construction site, where the first ramps are already taking shape. For the lower levels, the straight ramp proves its worth. The simulation's efficiency metrics show that, with enough workers and careful planning, blocks can be moved and stacked at a steady pace. The ramp is wide and gently sloped, allowing teams to work side by side, minimizing bottlenecks. The digital workers coordinate their efforts, using ropes, sledges, even wetting the sand to reduce friction, just as some Egyptologists have suggested. As the pyramid rises, the simulation shifts gears. The straight ramp, now too massive and unwieldy, is gradually dismantled. In its place, a spiral ramp is built, hugging the sides of the growing structure. The simulation shows how this method saves space and material, but also introduces new challenges: tight corners, steeper slopes, and the constant need for repairs. The digital workers adapt, using smaller teams and more precise coordination to maneuver the blocks around the spiral. When the pyramid reaches its upper levels, the simulation brings in levers and simple cranes. Here, brute force gives way to clever engineering. The digital workers use long wooden poles, counterweights, and pivot points to lift the blocks one level at a time. The simulation's physics engine calculates the force needed, the risk of breakage, and the importance of teamwork. The process is slower, but far more efficient than trying to extend ramps all the way to the top. Throughout the build, the simulation tracks every detail: the number of workers, time taken, the resources consumed, and the wear and tear on tools. It even models fatigue, showing how the pace slows as workers tire and need to rest. The data is clear. No single method is perfect, but the combination water transport, ramps, levers, and cranes proves to be the most effective solution. Watching the pyramid rise in the simulation is awe-inspiring. The blocks fit together with astonishing precision. The sides remain straight, and the base stays level. The digital workers celebrate as the final capstone is set in place, their years of effort rewarded with a monument that will stand for millennia. But the simulation reveals more than just a construction method. It offers surprising insights into the ingenuity and adaptability of the ancient Egyptians. The data shows that the real secret to building the pyramid was just in the tools or techniques, but in the organization, planning, and relentless problem-solving of the people involved. Every challenge, whether it was a broken ramp, a snapped rope, or a sudden flood, was met with creativity and determination. The simulation also highlights the importance of teamwork. Thousands of workers, each with a specific role, had to coordinate their efforts day after day, year after year. The logistics were staggering. Feeding, housing, and managing such a massive workforce required careful planning and strong leadership. The digital recreation helps us appreciate the human side of the story, the camaraderie, the pride, and the sense of shared purpose that must have driven the builders. Perhaps the most surprising insight is just how close the ancient Egyptians came to the limits of what was possible with their technology. The simulation shows that, with the right combination of methods and enough determination, the pyramid could be built, but only just. There was little room for error, and every step required careful calculation and constant adaptation. It's a testament to the brilliance of the engineers, architects, and workers who made it happen. As we reflect on the results, it's clear that the Great Pyramid is more than just a pile of stones. It's a symbol of what humanity can achieve when we dream big, work together, and refuse to give up in the face of the impossible. The digital simulation brings this lesson to life, showing us that the real wonder of the pyramid isn't just its size or age, but the story of the people who built it. So what does this mean for us today? The story of the pyramid is a reminder that every great achievement begins with a question, and that the answers are often more complex and more inspiring than we expect. It's a call to curiosity, to creativity, and to the belief that no challenge is too great if we are willing to work together and keep searching for solutions. As we close this journey, let's remember the ancient builders, not just as laborers, but as innovators, problem solvers, and dreamers. Their legacy lives on, not just in the stones of the pyramid, but in every act of human ingenuity and perseverance. If you've enjoyed this digital deep dive into one of history's greatest mysteries, please like this video, subscribe to The Forgotten File, and share your thoughts in the comments below. What do you think was the most ingenious part of the pyramid's construction? Do you have your own theory? Let's keep the conversation going and continue exploring the wonders of the past together. Thank you for joining us on this incredible journey. Till next time, keep questioning, keep imagining, and never stop building your own pyramids one block at a time.